Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this special episode, and don't forget to support our Patreon. Just $1 or more will get you early access to all of our content as well as other special features. Enjoy the show! The following is a fan-based video review under fair use. The Mummy is owned by Universal Pictures, Perfect World Pictures, KO Paper Products, Conspiracy Factory, Sean Daniel Company, Secret Hideout, and Alex Kurtzman. Please support the official release. Hey guys, what's up? It's BigJackFilms here, and welcome back to the final part of our Halloween special this year. Well, with Mummy Month dead and buried, and with Imhotep out of the picture, you think that would be it for me dealing with the undead. But nope! These corpses won't fucking stay dead, will they? Because everyone for years has been asking me to tackle the recent reboot of the franchise with what I like to call the Marvelitis Mummy. Let's just get this franchise failure over with. In 1127 AD, several English Crusader knights bury an Egyptian ruby within the tomb of one of their members, as we cut to present-day London with a construction crew discovering the tomb, and a mysterious man is authorized to investigate the site. If you're confused as I am on why the hell knights and bootlegged Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are doing in a mummy movie, this is gonna be Transformers The Last Night all over again, isn't it? In a flashback to the New Kingdom era, Princess Amenet, played by Sofia Boutella, is first in line to succeed her father Menephiter until his second wife gives birth to a son. Determined to claim the throne for herself, Amenet summons Set, who agrees to help her if she uses a mystical dagger to transfer his spirit into a physical form. After murdering her father, his wife, and their child, holy shit, and if you thought Anakin Skywalker was bad, Amenet attempts to sacrifice her lover to Set, but is captured by her father's priests and condemned to be mummified alive for eternity. Her sarcophagus is buried in Mesopotamia and submerged in a pool of mercury so that her monstrous form will not escape. Which would have been nice if Sailor Mercury sealed her away, but we're not so lucky. And unfortunately, there's no Magi this time around to keep a close eye. This script is so blocky, you'd swear it suffered a blood clot and died! Although given the fact that this is a mummy, that wouldn't surprise me! We then cut to the US Army in Egypt, Afghanistan, as we are introduced to Reconnaissance Sergeant Nick Morton, played by American action movie icon and Jack the Slayer of Darkness himself, Tom Cruise, who goes from military missionary to a thief of Baghdad, looting treasures to make a quick buck.
Where's your sense of adventure?
Well, I think I know how to sum up his characteristics.
We live and move a happy and free. Birds of a feather who travel together. Soldiers of fortune are we.
But Nick accidentally discovers the tomb of the Pharaoh of Amenet during a firefight in the Middle East, and we see a British Egyptianologist, played by Annabelle Wales, trying to excavate the findings. The resurrected Amenet emerges from her sarcophagus with a plot to enslave humanity. Joined by the S.H.I.E.L.D. of the movie, led by Russell Crowe, they must stop the all-powerful vassal of destruction to fulfill her destiny, as tragedy befalls present-day London. Will Nick let the mummy plunge our world into death and despair, or perhaps are there more unearthed gods and monsters in the world to combat her? So what are my thoughts on this reboot of the iconic Universal monster? Okay, well, first of all, here's my history and thoughts on the film. Having only seen Tomb of the Dragon Emperor recently, I am still glad I skipped out on it in theaters. At the time, The Dark Knight was taking over the scene, and of course, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was just around the corner with Iron Man released earlier that year in 2008. While all three Mummy movies were decent hits for Universal, especially with the Scorpion King spin-offs in between, the studio decided to also get on to making more remakes of their iconic monsters. They got Stephen Sommers on board with the Van Helsing movie in 2004 starring Hugh Jackman. However, despite decent portrayals of said monsters, the movie failed to live up to expectations, especially since they just straight up copied the Mummy formula. But surprisingly, around 2010, the studio did a pretty ballsy and impressive remake of The Wolfman, directed by Joe Johnston and starring Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. However, once again, it failed to meet expectations and flopped at the box office. And that's a shame, given the effects are pretty damn impressive, with a mix of both CGI and amazing makeup by Kong76 and makeup prosthetic master Rick Baker. With the recent failures of both films, one being its own thing and the other being a decent remake, Universal felt that just standalone movies weren't really doing the trick. And of course, in 2012, with the success of The Avengers, everyone started dealing with a horrible disease in Hollywood with what I call Marvelitis, meaning hoard-out crossovers and continuity of a shared franchise universe. So, Universal decided to cash in on the Marvel madness by announcing its plans for the Dark Universe. Ooh, why not the Monsterverse? Because Warner Brothers beat them to the punch with Godzilla and King Kong. The only question on Universal's mind was where to start and what monster would be the first to lead the charge. Well, in 2014, they did their first real attempt with Dracula Untold, a prequel story starring Bard the Bowman himself, Luke Evans, as the iconic vampire of Transylvania. But once again, the vampire was drained on blood with the critics and box office.
So you'd think after 3 times trying to get this monster franchise going that Universal would stop and not get ahead of themselves. Nope!
Since 1999, almost every attempt at a monster reboot by the studio crashed and burned like the Frankenstein monster in the windmill. And the only real success that Universal had in their monsters was, of course, the Mummy franchise. So thinking the monster that brings that sweet mummy, they decided the official start to the cinematic universe is the iconic bandaged bastard. And to be fair, the trailers had me interested. The idea of a continuity-driven universe with Universal's library had me intrigued, and on top of that, a great cast including Russell Crowe, who starred in a lot of my favorite Ridley Scott movies, and Captain Maverick himself, Tom Cruise. There was a lot to be intrigued by this upcoming film. However, as critics came out, that interest died immediately, and I had no interest in seeing it up until recently with Mummy Month, because thank God, this movie is a mummified mess! There is no talent, no effort, and is obviously trying to cash in on Marvel's success.
However, before we jump into this decomposing diarrhea, there are 1 or 2 things that I kind of found interesting and gave the film some decent qualities. Like finding gold in a turd of shit.
First off, the 2 male leads are honestly not bad. Despite Tom Cruise's character not really fitting in a film like this, he is quite charming and does pull some decent humorous moments.
Let me think. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we're probably gonna die here. Okay, we're just gonna take a minute, and we're all gonna come up with a new plan.
In fact, the guy is over 50 and he still does his own stunts. That's actually pretty damn awesome. Say what you will about the guy, but I kinda have respect of how much he loves making movies like this. He's practically the Evel Knievel of Hollywood. The only issue I have is that as a man of the military, it's kind of insulting given his thieving ways. Plus, he seems really out of place as a character. If he was playing it more like a Rick O'Connell, I'd be more interested. Hell, why not have him be the great-grandson of O'Connell? That actually would have been pretty cool. But they also add him with the whole chosen one cliche by giving him not only immortality, but odd superpowers. Look, Universal, I know you're trying to be Marvel, but don't turn monsters into superheroes. That doesn't work at all. They're monsters because they're scary, supernatural, and can fucking kill you, not save the day. Forget the Justice League of America. This is supposed to be a league of super evil. However, while Tom and the Mummy have little to no chemistry, his interactions with Russell Crowe are at least cheesy but fun. However, Russell Crowe is playing another iconic classic monster.
My name is Jekyll. Dr. Henry Jekyll.
Yep, you heard it right. They not only included the Mummy in this, but also Dr. Jekyll. But to be fair, at least Russell Crowe is looking like he's having fun with what he's given. He's pretty much the Nick Fury of the film, but also manages to perfectly switch between the organized, calm Dr. Jekyll to the chaotic and mysterious Mr. Hyde. So why the fuck is it called The Mummy then? It should be called The Mummy vs. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I feel like in a solo Mr. Hyde film, Russell Crowe would definitely be able to do more. But because this is a Marvel ripoff, they had to shoehorn as much of a universe as they could into one film, and in that sense, it really sucks Crowe isn't able to truly explore this role. Hell, if you want to make it Marvel, why not adapt the shitty NES game? Because there's plenty of comedy comic book gold to work with there. As for the rest of the characters, they're bland, forgettable, and just the typical comic book movie side characters. The girl attributes really nothing of interest to the plot aside from being Tom's 10,000th love interest in the movie. I mean, for God's sakes, this is just Natalie Portman and Thor. Which, by the way, did you know Tom Cruise was originally up for the role of Iron Man when it was first in development back in 2005? Tom's friend, on the other hand, how should I put this? More or less pays tribute to American Werewolf in London.
You know, I always thought I had a chance with her.
What?
How do you squander that?
There's mercury in that tomb.
I mean, how do
Vapors
you
are
mess
toxic.
that up?
It's just in my head.
Actually, you know what? No, it's not a tribute. It's a goddamn ripoff!
Am I asleep now, awake, or what?
I realize I don't look so hot, David. But I thought you'd be glad to see me.
How lazy do you have to be to rip off one of your greatest monster films, Universal? Hell, instead of this being part of the cinematic universe, you could set this in the American Monster series as an American Mummy in London. But no, that would be too difficult, since it's more than likely either way that John Landis is gonna sue somebody. Well, despite the amount of rip-offs and shoehorning in other monsters, what about our titled monster of the Mummy? Well, to be perfectly honest, when the announcement came out that the monster would be a female, I was actually on board with it. If this was to compete or be like Marvel, there's nothing wrong with diverting some of the monsters appropriately, since female monsters are mostly rare with the likes of Bride of Frankenstein or Dracula's daughter, and the Mummy was perfectly fine to be female. Though, to be fair, they opened themselves in calling this film the Mommy rather than the Mummy. And for what it's worth, Sofia Boutella honestly does a pretty good job with her performance, showcasing a sense of menace but also real sympathy. You could tell she hates being in this position of power and physicality for thousands of years, but is sadly too late to save with the darkness that has consumed her. However, story-wise, her character's origins are all over the map and don't make a lick of sense. The rest of the production as well is just a big waste of time and money for the studio, from the music, sound, special effects, and set designs. The deserts are on par with Transformers 2, the tomb looks more like the Lazarus pits from The Dark Knight Rises, and the rest of the film looks so unoriginal and bland. With the exception of the monster room filled with all kinds of Easter eggs, which, I'm not gonna lie, kinda had me grinning a little bit with the skull of Dracula and the hand of the creature from the Black Lagoon in mason jars.
However, surprisingly enough, the best moment in this film is an Easter egg that pretty much says it's a complete and utter Marvel ripoff. Yep, those movies are canon now! Way to ruin it, movie!
Yep, for some odd reason, the Brendan Frasier movies are actually canon to the Dark Universe. But that raises even more questions regarding what the hell Universal was doing here. How did the S.H.I.E.L.D. knockoff get the book? What happened to the Magi protecting it? Where does Rick O'Connell and his family fit into all this? Does the S.H.I.E.L.D. ripoff have any knowledge of Imhotep, Anubis, and the Scorpion King? If canon, are they aware of the current whereabouts of the immortal Dracula from Untold? There's so many plot holes and more questions raised that I can't even process it. Ow! Yeah, that's a dozen of cliffhanger questions about this movie and the monsters that will never be answered, and honestly, I'm just rambling at this point because I don't want to talk about this piece of shit anymore. I'm sorry to be relatively short, but I've got nothing on this movie. It was boring, it was bland, it did nothing for me. In fact, it makes me want to put a point up for Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, because despite the fact that Rachel Weisz was recast, the rest of the movie is pretty damn entertaining. And much like this review, The Mummy 2017 overall is a massive clogged toilet of a mess. There's little to no consistent plot, the characters are assholes, the mummy is wasted potential, and the movie was more about its world building than its rooted story and characters. Now, I'm all for world building, but you gotta give me an invested plot and characters before you move on to that point. The original Star Wars trilogy did this, and then they improved it with the prequels, and the sequel trilogy did absolutely nothing! Sorry to say this, writers, but the main story comes first. The world building should be while the going is good. I don't know why no one considers films like this straight up rip-offs anymore. But that's what this film ultimately is, a rip-off of a billion-dollar concept with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which thankfully from what I've been seeing has been dying down since this film, because we're going less for a cinematic universe to a cinematic multiverse, exploring all kinds of different dimensions and variants which allow for previous entries in these franchises to get a second win, with the upcoming Flash movie and the rumored inclusion of previous incarnations of Spider-Man in No Way Home. However, to be fair, Universal has actually gotten a second win with horror and monsters, with welcoming a home to the Halloween series, sharing parenting with Blumhouse Entertainment, as well as a pretty decent remake on The Invisible Man. But regards to this film and the Dark Universe, it did absolutely nothing for me, coming off at a wasted production of a 3.7 out of 10. The movie definitely didn't help Universal's franchise plans, and I think after 3 attempts to revive the classic monsters, just stick with the classics or the Brendan Frasier trilogy. And as a classic internet meme would say, it's time to stop!
And with that said, I think I'm gonna take a long extended vacation. These Mummy movies have absolutely drained me, both good and bad. Hell, I might just go over to Universal Studios Florida now that this bloody pandemic is at an end.
I think not.
Oh, for fuck's sakes!
Careful, patient 92. Your animalistic behavior from 2017 is showing.
Okay, this is getting ridiculous. Where the hell are you getting this information, Stone? Who the hell is your boss? Unlike Karen on a board day, I'd actually like to have a valid discussion with your manager.
You forget, patient 92. The higher authority would love to speak to you. You have escaped our grasp for this long, but he will not let you get away this time.
Well, maybe it's time we meet him face to face, because I've had a lot of gripes with how your boss is handling this. In fact, it's impossible, because if it is who I think it is, he hasn't practiced medicine in over 15 years.
Good evening, Mr. Buchanan.
You.